I am super excited to do this podcast with one of my favorite people in this whole world. You can say that about a lot of people and not fully mean it, but this time I really mean it. If I ever share an experience about my past, about someone that's had a huge impact in my life and that has given me a different perspective that's made me better, Joe's name is always the top of the list, and there's so many reasons why. But this is Joe Legerski, and he actually recruited me out of high school to play for the University of Utah. And if it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't have been recruited by anybody, but he saw something special in me, and I am so, so grateful. I'm gonna have him tell a little bit about his journey in his coaching career, where he started and where he ended up, and then I'm gonna dive into 2 questions for him that I'm super passionate about. Getting his insight on this is going to be a blessing to everyone that is listening. First, thank you for being here. Always saying yes to the crazy things I keep asking you to do. Next, he's doing the cold plunge. Just so you know, he's already committed. I'm putting it out here so that everyone can see that now you're accountable and you can't say no. But thank you so much. And can you share with us a little bit about what got you into basketball, your path, your journey, and where you ended up?
Well, first, Alli, thank you for the kind words. As you've known, we've known each other, as I talk about, for 30 years. And when you asked me to be able to help you out, it was an easy yes. And it's always been that way, where I look back, and any former player that I've had the privilege of being able to coach, I always want to see them be successful, and if there's anything I ever can do to help them. So this falls in line real easy. But when you take a look back at my career, where I wanted to start with, what I wanted to do, I was a high school player, never talented enough to move on, and thought I'd be an accountant, and went to school to be an accountant, and then one summer had the opportunity to coach Little League Baseball, and just had so much fun with Little League Baseball, and all of a sudden thought, you know what, I'm going to look into this coaching aspect, and how can I coach? And back in the 70s, early 80s, the way you coached was you became a high school teacher. Well, I'd already been through 2 years of college in the business school, so I became a business teacher so that I could keep that progression going, and got into coaching, and thought all along, what I'll do is, my mentors I looked to were high school teachers, high school coaches. You coach for 25, 30 years and called it a career. And that's what I planned to do, and started out that first year in the junior high, coached football, coached basketball, coached track, of which I knew nothing about. You did a little of everything, and that's where it all started. Progressive-wise, I ended up moving on to the high school, moved to the junior college, and then had an opportunity to go to Division I. And I think that's the journey that I had. I always say that I worked a lifetime, 40 years, never felt like I worked a day in my life, because I was always in the gym.
I can speak to that. I remember after coaching, people always told me they'd get Sunday night blues. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I mean, our days all rolled together. There no such thing as holidays, but going to work was getting on a plane and go and watch a kid play basketball, or, going to a game. And it never felt like a day of work, honestly, until a loss. Then you wonder, what the heck are we doing in this business?
Yeah. People are always asking me, do you miss it now that I'm retired? And I said, some aspects. I miss getting a group together, formulating a plan, trying to figure out how you can succeed, seeing young people grow. But what I don't miss is the stress of winning and losing. And there's so much stress with that. And I watched the championship men's game, and it came down to the last possession. And you saw the excitement of the Florida coach, the team, celebrating that victory. And all of a sudden, I remember those moments of winning, being so excited. And then the camera flashes right to the Houston coach and the Houston bench. And all of a sudden, all those emotions changed immediately for me, because I remember the heartbreaking losses. As we always said in the profession, the highs were never as high as you hoped, and the lows, boy, they hit you sometimes and hit you hard.
For sure, and we kind of talked about this, but someone asked me, as a coach and as a player, would you rather lose by 2 or get blown out? What are your thoughts on that?
During that game, I sent a message to a colleague that's still in the profession, and I said there'll be no sleeping tonight for those coaches, because when you lost by a possession, you as a coach believe that there was something you could have done over that 40 minutes to change that outcome, and that could you have put your players in a better situation. And that's where I said that you will run that game over and over and over. That will come back years later. I can think of games where I go, I should have been able to try this, or try that to help my team. And then, as I always joke, when you're getting beat by 30, and believe me, as a head coach, I was being beaten by 30, 40 points, and all you do is look at your assistants and go, let's not call timeout. That's just going to prolong the game. Get it over, get on the bus, and regroup. One possession games.
They're painful, but knowing you gave yourself a chance is easier to live with than getting blown out and saying, we're just not prepared and we can't compete at this level. And really convincing your kids that they can after a loss like that. A 2-point loss, not just the coaches, but every player relives those moments where maybe you forced a drive that wasn't there, or maybe you take that shot and try to get fouled at the very end. Sadly, it was the same player in both situations, and that will eat him alive for a long time.
The part that I enjoyed about coaching was seeing the growth of your team from the start. And I had a colleague of mine tell me when I became a head coach to save the video of your first practice every year. Watch it at the end of the year, and you'll see the growth in your team over the 6 months. Because when you're immersed in it, you don't think about that. All you're doing is trying to prepare for the next game, move to the next point, win the next game. When you look back at that from day one in October, back in our day, we started October 15th. There was no summer practice. There was midnight madness. Yeah. And so you did that. And it was always refreshing to look back and know where you moved your team from point A to point B.
Well, I'm going to brag about you for a little bit that accounting was definitely an ability that you had as an assistant and as a head coach. Joe, you were honestly the best coach at time and score that I have ever seen. You understood how to, I don't know how many games you would end up winning in the final 3 minutes because you managed the clock and every possession better. And I just watched your mind work when I was on the opposing bench several times, coaching against you. And you just were a magician of time and score. And I think when you were at Wyoming, it was a huge part of your success as a coach because you had talent, but you were able to compete with anybody because you could manage the game so well. I think there's coaches that are in top 10 that do not manage the game great because they rely on the athletes so much. And you're seeing that change a little bit more. But the other thing you brought up that I think is really a sign of a great coach is one that actually the team does get better as the season goes on. I think that it starts with a practice, like you said, but at a timeout, when you have just a short moment with your team, the conversation you've always had is, this is what we're going to go out and do better. In my experience at Utah with both you and Elaine, the one thing I realized is I went back out on the court after a timeout knowing what I should do. The difference is a lot of times at a timeout, coaches are telling you everything you just did wrong as a team. And you go out there with less confidence, less direction. And ultimately, whatever the outcome of the game, it wasn't a teaching moment that propelled you forward in that timeout. And I always admired coaches that could, no matter what just happened, no matter how angry or emotional they are, when a timeout happens, that team knows exactly, we need to do this better, and we're going to go out and do A, B, and C. And that team knows exactly the direction they need to go, and they have they have confidence. The coach is saying, we can, you know, and I love that.
Well, what I've learned in our conversation right now is I should have had you as my agent. So there's no doubt. One of the things I look back on is the way my style became. And we're going to talk about this a little later, and I'll mention Elaine Elliott, because she was someone who had a huge impact on the way I coached. I truly believe the success that I had. But it was a possession by possession game. And so you knew there were only so many possessions in a game. And I guess maybe my accounting background, because, you know, I always view everything through numbers.
Yes.
You looked at the floor. Where did you have the advantage numerically? That's how you attacked. And I remember one day in practice, I'm talking to you about that, and you go, Joe, I don't see the game in numbers. I just feel the game. And that was something different for me to have to learn, that not everybody looked at it numerically, that we have an advantage 3-on-2, 2-on-1. We attack this side because they're outnumbered. And that was something that I had to learn from that. But yet, I agree with you. I had an interesting thing. There were a lot of things that programs try to do. And at Wyoming one year, they auctioned off an item, be a coach for a day. And So a fan won that auction item, and he came to shoot around, sat right behind the bench, everything. And he told me after the game, he said, you know what was interesting I learned today? I always thought the coach was making all the mistakes. And I saw you in a timeout, and you went right through what everyone was supposed to do. And 9 out of 10 times they went out and did what you asked. But the 10th time, their mind was somewhere else, and they did not get accomplished what you were asking. And he said that was an eye-opener to him as a fan. And I said, well, you learn that sometimes players are worried about the last shot they missed. Maybe it was the last foul. Maybe it was the turnover. Maybe the fact they were just tired and trying to catch their breath. And so trying to get the attention in a huddle was probably the biggest thing to make sure the execution started. And so I progressed to the fact, no matter how long the timeout was, there was a portion just for the players. The players could talk to each other, could grab a drink, do whatever they needed to do. And then I stepped into the huddle for the last portion of it. And that's when all focus came onto me.
It's really smart. I think that 30-second attention span is about all there is. And were you able to get all your information across in 30 seconds,
No,
Joe?
because as you know, Al, I can talk for a long time. I guess maybe that's part of what coaching is too. Yeah, you're always trying to sell.
Yeah.
I come to our university, this is what we have, and instead of what I also learned over that time was to listen better. Listen to what your assistants had to say. Listen to what your players are telling you. And that's a component that I think becomes very important, not only to be the one that's talking all the time, but are you listening?
And listening can be a hard reality that many don't want to know what people are really thinking, so they ignore it on purpose. But it doesn't make you better. Listening really can change the whole dynamic of your team.
Completely. And I know we're going to get to a couple things a little later, and I'll expand on that for us.
Well, let's go into that. There's 2 questions I want to ask you, Joe. I'm really, really passionate about this idea of words from the wise. I think that you spend your whole life really becoming an expert in something, and right about the time you figure it out, you're like, it's time to retire. And you're giving all your input, advice to these young athletes. And if you were to, and really, right now is when you should be teaching the teacher, training the trainer, and helping them. Unless you write a book or you start a life coaching company or consulting company, then all of a sudden all this wisdom isn't being heard or shared. And that's a big reason I wanted to have you on here, is the wisdom that you have, the experiences that you've had, the growth that's taken place, what you have to offer. That if you were to look back on your younger coaching self or a coach today, what are a few things that you would tell them that really would have been good for you to know earlier in your career that became really game changers for you?
The biggest thing I look back on, and it's going to fall into just one category, but how the category changes. And I talk about it is to surround yourself with knowledgeable people, plain and simple. And I go, well, what phases are we looking at? When I was an assistant, I thought I knew basketball, knew about this much. And I was fortunate as an assistant, I worked with 2 coaches at their respective universities that became Hall of Fame coaches at their respective institution. And the majority of my time as an assistant was spent at the University of Utah with Elaine Elliott, who is a Hall of Fame coach, one of the best coaches I could have associated myself with. So when I say surround yourself with knowledgeable people, I'm a big believer in a mentor and having that person be able to engage with you, to tell you and show you their knowledge to help you along the way. Yes, I understood basketball to an extent. Working with Elaine, the whole world exploded for me of how to put a team together, how to strategize, how to develop players, how to be able to handle winning and losing. And when I look back at my career, she and foremost is someone that I look at and go, she really shaped how I became a head coach. But now on the flip side, when you become a head coach, now what I found is I had so many more duties. As an assistant, all I worried about every day was basketball. Every day, it's all I worried about. I became a head coach and found out basketball was a small portion of my life now.
Opposite of what people would think.
Yes. All of a sudden, I'm meeting with academic people. I'm meeting with trainers every day. I'm meeting with strength coaches. I'm meeting with nutritionists. I'm meeting with the marketing team. You're meeting with the ticket office. And a big part of Wyoming was meeting with boosters. And, Wyoming is an institution. It's the only four-year school in the whole state. So everybody points to the University of Wyoming. Over here, we had Utah, BYU were the big rivals. You had Weber State up the road, Utah State a little further, Utah Valley. I mean, there's a number of institutions around that everybody points to.
You became the show.
You became the show. And with that, you may have to drive 4 or 5 hours one way to speak to 20 to 100 people that cared about your program, and then drive home. And I found that so much of that, now I had to rely upon some knowledgeable people to help the basketball portion. And so that in a nutshell is surround yourself with knowledge, but it's two different phases. One where you're young in the profession, learning, one where you're older in the profession and you need help. And so I look at it, now that I'm retired, I'm in my later 60s, I'll put it that way. If I was to get into your industry, it still applies. I need to surround myself with knowledgeable people because I am young in your profession. I'm young learning how to be able to motivate, accomplish, be successful until you can reach that point where you're now the mentor. And probably the last 5 or 6 years, the first few years as a head coach, we would have 100 people show up at a game. And I remember the old Utah Jazz coach, Frank Late,
Oh yeah.
speaking one time. And somebody asked him, "Coach, what time's your game?" And his comment was, "What time can you be there?" And people would tell me, "Coach, I'm gonna come see you play." And I'd go, "Well, you better make sure, because with 100 people, I'll know if you're there." And so it was about trying to get people to come see what we could do. And 4 years in, we win a national tournament at NIT in front of 15,000 people. And it felt like that became the jumping off point where so many people had learned about what Wyoming basketball was. And now our attendance went from 100 people to thousands of people consistently. And so then later in my career, what I wanted to do is find out what other people did in their careers. So instead of me trying to convince Alli to come to my game, I wanted to know how you were successful in your profession. What did you do to be successful? And then I could help apply it. I know you and I had lunch a month ago and we sat down. I don't know how we ended up finishing lunch because both of us were just talking, and I'm trying to get so much from you to be able to apply to what I do today. And so it still is that way with trying to surround yourself with some knowledgeable people.
That was very insightful, and I can say so. I played for Elaine Elliott, and Joe was the assistant at the time, as I mentioned. These were mentors that shaped my life as an athlete, as a player, and as a coach also. And I look back and I think of, what was it about Elaine that made her so special? She was hard, she was tough, but she was consistent, and she was a winner, and her teams all believed they could win. A big part of that is how she handled the loss. You go out and you get better and work on yourself, all the things that by the end of the year, you've improved upon and didn't focus on all the things we weren't doing. It was just always about us, not about the opponent. And with Joe, and I respected that. And as a coach, I really wanted to be consistent with my players, consequence and reward, and just that they always knew what they could get from me. Like it or not, the honesty was there. And I respected that so much. With Joe, you talk about asking questions and surrounding yourself with people that support an area where you might feel weak or less than or have a need at the time. But the asking question things you've always had. And the one thing, and I tell you this all the time, is that you've always asked questions about anyone you've recruited. In fact, so much that you ask questions to the inner circle. And when I was getting recruited and my best friend was getting recruited by you, both of our sisters felt like they were getting recruited by you because they felt so much a part of that experience. Not everybody does that, Joe. That is a gift, and we were recipients of that. And to this day, I'm like, Joe just asks everybody about what's going on in their life. You always leave your conversation with Joe feeling so great because you did all the talking and he never talked about himself. Joe says he talks a lot, but you ask so many great questions. You get me thinking different, but you genuinely care about people. And I think that's why your crowd changed. I think it didn't matter the product as much as the person that was there running it was so genuine, was so passionate about it. And of course, that was the main show. They just didn't know the show they were missing until you introduced it. The next question, last question that I want to talk to you about, this idea of identity and how for your whole life, you've been Joe the athlete, Joe the coach. Same for me. I remember when I was getting ready to leave coaching altogether, my mom asked me, Alli, are you okay not being Alli the athlete or Alli the coach anymore? And it was a valid question because even dating, I mean, what a great conversation starter. Whether the guy liked me or not, he really liked my job. And it was always a great way to connect with people. And I thought, you know, this career really shaped me and it made me who I am, but it doesn't define me. But as you change careers, and in your case, retire, how have you been able to shift out of that identity of a coach and not find yourself either wanting or needing or feeling a lack of energy and passion for things when that's been so much a part of your life?
You know, I'll admit it's a challenge because the first thing that ends up happening is that's how you're known. And when people see you, still to this day, there will be people that see me in Wyoming and they'll go, Coach, how you doing? And so it is constantly, that's who you were to them. What I found is, you know, I retired in 2019. You have all these plans, and then about 6-7 months later, the whole world shuts down. And so you're going, okay, now what do I do? And we all went through the COVID experience. I was used to being with a group all the time. And so you had to try to make some adjustments. And what I found in retirement is everybody always asks you, well, what do you do in retirement? And I was having a very difficult time answering that question because really you can do whatever you want. There is not one specific thing. And so when I looked at it, what I came to the conclusion, I know what I don't do. I don't go to the office every day, or as you know, in basketball cases, maybe 7 days. 60 hours a week was nothing during the season. And so you started having all these options to basically reinvent yourself to do what you want. And you may go, well, why couldn't you do that before? Because you were committed to trying to succeed. And as I remember recruiting you, talking to your family, I could remember looking at Walt and Karen and going, we will take care of your daughter. What a responsibility to sit there. That is not a 9-to-5 job. If you needed something in the evening, we were there to help you. If you needed something on a weekend, we were there to help you. I look at it today. We're here today. And that's the part that I enjoy doing. And what I've done since, spent more time with family, spent more time with grandkids, spent more time worrying about longevity in your life, as you and I have spoke before about. But yet I've worked on some projects and I laugh with people now. I keep an actual calendar. I never used to keep a calendar because nobody would ever ask you to do much because they knew.
Say no.
You would say no. Hey, what are you doing next Wednesday? Well, I work. I coach. How about next weekend? Oh, we got games. Oh, I'm recruiting. It just never ended. Now when people go, hey, what can you do? Can you do a podcast on Wednesday? Well, let me check my calendar. Can you do this? I'm on a board where we put together a facility for kids to be able to participate in. Has 10 courts in it, indoor turf. That was a big project that I was on for 2 years, just to give young people another opportunity. I still do camps every now and then.
You just flew up to Wyoming for a camp.
Yeah, I'm a little slower doing camps than I used to be.
Well, Joe, the key is you don't demonstrate. You get other people to demonstrate.
You're right, Alli. My skills have left with basketball.
I don't even dare show ball handling drills anymore.
But those are things that you find, like I said, when you start asking and talking to people about what do they do. That's been the big change for me over the last 10 years because I really like to be able to find out what other successful people have done, what they've accomplished, and how they went about it, and what piece of that I can still use in my life. You're right. My wife and I are going to do the cold plunge. That's going to be an experience.
Yes.
That's going to be something we're looking forward to. A little dreading at the same time, but once again, it's just something else to add to who we are, what you're doing, and that's the part that's kind of fun right now. I still watch so much basketball. I miss the tip, everything that leads up to it and everything. But as I said earlier, I don't miss the agony. I sleep a lot better at nights than what I used to, but still involved with a lot of people, a lot of conversation, and just as I always say, I'm never done learning.
Being a life learner is a sign of someone that is successful in every phase of life, and I love that. I can honestly say, when we got together a month ago, we talk about this identity and changing really careers, to being an empty nester, to retiring, that your identity is in your routine, and it can look different for everybody, but you do need to keep doing things in hearing you that make you feel like you're growing and progressing. And now it's about longevity. And the questions you've asked about, staying in shape, I mean, you did 75 hard with your family and you adapted it to fit perfect with the 50-year-old. You loved it. And I think the competitive side never goes away. I mean, you compete different and for different reasons, but that's hard to ever erase.
Yeah, we've been in a world that's competitive. You're judged on winning and losing. That does not leave you. There's things, and like you're right, when my children that are all ages from 28 to 38 now brought this idea up of this challenge, and I'm looking at them that I'm in my late 60s, I don't need this. And yet it was the best thing because it did give you that focus of going, I'm back to being competitive. I sit there and look at our family. Everybody was involved in athletics, some at the highest level. I have a stepson that played in the NFL. I have all kinds that played collegiately. So needless to say, card games in the Legerski household are highly competitive. There's a lot of trash talking. So to do this health challenge, I mean, it became a challenge. And nobody wanted to give in. And that was an interesting part just to see. And as soon as it ended, it became, so how do we build upon this as a family? Because we thought it was such a great deal. And yes, were there modifications? You bet there were modifications for me. It just was, Dad, you can count stretching for the day as working out. And so we laughed about that, but yet we found benefit for everybody at whatever age. And so that's been a positive, and that's the stuff that keeps driving us. And so, as I said, no longer do I go down on the court, but we sit there and look at different things. As I mentioned, we build a facility in Wyoming that is unbelievable, and to be able to go out and fundraise and see the vision, and once again, surround yourself. We're back to the topic. Surround yourself with knowledgeable people, because you're never too old or too young to learn something.
Well, you've just given us an incredible message today, and you continue to inspire me. I absolutely love and adore you, and you've been one of the most stable and motivating mentors. I've followed your whole career, and I'm grateful for the friendship we have now. And I love that you're continuing to say yes to opportunities, to try new things and grow, because that's ultimately what life is all about. It starts with yes, 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 then you have to say no for a while, and it's back to yes, and I love it. So thank you for saying yes to come today, saying yes to do the sauna and maybe the cold, but we'll get you in that water. But thank you. I love you, and we have a lot of fun things in the future.
Al, I appreciate this. The hardest part for me as a coach is when we start talking about players, and I can go through a number of them, and all of a sudden I go, yeah, what is she now, like 32? And all of a sudden you forget that everybody does not stay somewhere between 20 and 30 years old. But to see the success that my former players have had and are having, like yourself, you know what? It isn't about winning and losing a basketball game. We just feel like we accomplished a great deal. And as you can tell, I get emotional talking about former players. So thank you for the invite. And I know we'll get together from time to time, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.